Hello everybody, this is Base Games, and welcome back to Crossout 101 with the second part of the All You Have Need to Know About Cabins video. And today we'll be going in on all the epic cabins, and their stats, and which ones are better or which one are worse. Let's get right into it. Alright, going up to the Epic class, we're going to start out with the Cerberus Light Cabin, which is, again, one of the more unique cabins. It is not craftable, and it was obtainable via this Arsonist pack, and as far as I know, it's no longer obtainable, but it does have a very unique build quirk, because, well, as you can see, it has a giant drill bit. And on top of that, if you look at the height of the frame here, you can see that the cabin actually gets at frame height at some point, preventing it from getting placed further back. Its connection points are rather simple. Other than lacking its two most rear points, it has a base of uh, 8, but it does have the additional drill bit in front, which is I think 5 long, which makes this thing actually the longest cabin in the game at 13 blocks. But if you don't really count it, I would consider this thing pretty much 10 long plus a drill bit. The fact that it's only 4 wide and 4 tall doesn't make it a very like thin cabin, and makes it easy to build around it. And also with the really nice build hitbox, and the fact that it has 2 top layers to put guns on, it is a pretty convenient cabin to build with. That said, other than the fact that it does have 12 energy, there's nothing too special to it, because other than the melee unit, of course, it does not have a real perk. And even though like light cabins were kind of meant to have 13 energy, in a way, like all of them compensate with it to have some kind of weapon built in one way or another. In this case, it is the melee. So it basically is perkless in that regard. And the extremely high power score 1800 compared to 1500 for the normal ones doesn't help it too much either. It only really just pumps up the power score even more. It has a low power as well, which is problematic again. Tonnage and mass limits are also low, and those are just the main things pestering this thing. It does have the maximum speed of 100 km/h, which is equal to the Growl and all the other epic light cabins, as well as the Terreiro. And the Terreiro is something we'll go into it in a little bit, because that one is also a little bit of a special peanut. Back to the pickup sized cabins, we got the Harpy. Again, 9 long, 4 wide, but with this one, because of a giant undercabin thing that I failed to notice, I'll actually require a small second to actually fix that and show you guys the proper bottom of this thing. Because, well, this cabin is also pretty unique because it is a event cabin, which is a different way of saying it is unobtainable. It is currently not craftable. Its connection points are decent. I think it does have the corners here, so let me quickly check that. Yes, it does have the corners over there. And it got 6 wide, 4 high. And this one does got a small amount in the front here. Large top in top mount, but it does lack this like middle piece here. And any connection points on the side here are lacking as well. One thing to point out is that it does have some sneaky connection points, like visible on the sides here, but I actually are, as far as I'm aware, not functional. I mean, you can put stuff underneath there, but the connection point that is right here, visible, is not usable in any way, which is a downside. But what does make this cabin unique is going to be its epic perk. And I will actually have to go into the perks of all the epic cabins a little bit as well. This one increases the extra ammunition given by ammunition and microfracture bundles by 50%. It does not boost the base ammo capacity of a gun. It only increases the effectiveness of the ammo packs and Genesis modules. It also improves the explosion radius by 20%, which in return just boosts the damage output of any explosive type weapons, such as these charged cannons. And that coupled with a high maximum speed does make a pretty decent pick, but it does suffer from a really low mass limit and tonnage for epic cabins. And it is something really just like a double-edged sword. Like you can have a lot of firepower, but the main things you want to use them on, which are cannons, are too heavy to really be carried around by this cabin. Like, if possible, I would use this perk on a double mammoth rig, but because the mammoths have the largest exposure radius among weapons in the game. But really, just because you can't really make use of it due to the weight, it's kind of a bad part. But it is a really good pickup. It is not too expensive, as far as I'm aware. We will check prices of the epic cabins in after we're done with all of them, but it's definitely one you should pick up. Continuing with the very unique light cabins. Kind of props. Gonna give props on Battle Angel on making this pretty nice helicopter, which I found this cabin on, and it comes with the current 20 euros pack, the Wild Hunt pack. You can see it right here. And while the pack is not too valuable, the cabin's perk is definitely interesting. Because for every 100 meter covered by the car, the carbon collision damage will increase by 100%, which stacks up to 3 times. And basically, you have to hit players directly with this dust cabin. It does have a almost full resistance against melee impacts, but it doesn't have any protection against melee damage itself. Similar how the Cerberus doesn't have any protection from explosions, which kills it, which makes himself like players using the Cerberus kill themselves when hitting a generator. You do have to watch out when hitting explosives with this cabin as well. That said, when coupled with boosters and a bit of weight, you can sometimes one-shot builds if you can actually hit them in the cabin or when using Goliath tracks hit the side of the Goliath. You can actually just like one-shot people with it. And it can definitely be a very unorthodox but very fun build. That's that they are very long, and they have a 6x4 and a 2x2 base plate, which makes the base area 8 long and then a 3 long tusk area basically, which you generally want to keep the front 3 blocks free to really have a proper impact, unless you're building a sideways build and you want to ram people sideways with it, or whatever else you really want to be doing with this cabin. I don't know. But that's generally what you're going to be doing with it, or like you put it right in the front. But it is exposed, and it does have low maximum speed and low durability. And other than for using those big melee ram attacks, it really doesn't have another use. Uh, its connection points are also rather bad. The back is decent, but you all basically you have this 4 high area right here, and this entire area is not built on pawn, and the entire front area is not buildable on pawn, which does heavily limit the way how you can build this thing with it. And yeah, again, just other than with the melee impact builds, you don't really have any other use for this cabin. We now go on to the bully pack, which has the bully armor parts and features the medium cabin favorite. 12 energy as well, and a top speed of 90 kilometers an hour, which is pretty close to that 100 kilometers an hour, and has a mass limit of 10,500. Its perk is one of the most powerful heat-based weapons-related perk, because when it charged while moving, and when activated, it resets accumulated heat of all mounted weapons and modules. And I think it was 200 or 300 meters for it to charge, and it can be improved while using Bigfoot wheels. Its power is decent. Durability is 280 points, which is also decent. It's a kind of obnoxious tonnage of 5250, which is number generally they're rounded at 500, but this one is rounded at 250. It is exactly the half the amount of the total mass limit. and generally all of the new cabins have that, the half of the mass. It's a 6x6x4 cabin, similar to the hot rod cabin, but this one does have extra connection points on the side here. And it go up to the 5 blocks, but the 6th block does not have that. Because again, with the armor pack that it fits around, I will show you guys how it looks basically simple down by removing some of this stuff and removing the decor items. And the stickers to make it less obnoxious for you guys. These are the different armor pieces that are related to this cabin. So you get the front hood. You can see how it actually connects to the little block intersection right there. And it also means that there's a very small room to actually put wheels in this front area. And you do not have a hood. Just something to point out. That said, this is one of the best cabins in the game, and if you can get your hands on it, do get it. It is expensive because it is a back cabin, and again, it is just a meta item, so it is expensive. But it is definitely worth it if you can get your hands on it. You can actually build in this area as well. It has like a 2x1 slope, and then 6 wide. You can use those in the front, but you cannot put anything in the sides. Connection points are decent with a full side, pretty much full rear. And just at the window height, it doesn't have anything. Sadly, it does not have any points right here, but that will probably make it just too good, and it just wouldn't fit really because this line is just a little bit higher than the 2 blocks height. A cabin very similar, but just a little bit better, is the Terreiro. Terreiro is also 6x6x4. But it actually gets the 2 connection points in the front, like in the front, it doesn't have those either. It only has 4 instead of 5, as you guys can see. That's the amount of connection points it has, but it does actually have the wheel well in return. It comes with the Corrida armor parts, and this is how it will look with only those armor parts. And these are not the parts that are connected to it. You would actually have to move these forward instead. And as said, these do not line up, the Corrida parts. For whatever reason, they just do not line up. Which is a bummer. But the nose cut and the shoulder parts, as well as the Mariposa bumper, do all pretty much line up. That said, as I said, this is probably one of the best cabins in the game, because it has 100 km/h max speed and 10,000 kg mass limit. So it has that super high maximum speed, but a higher mass limit. And also increases accuracy of all mounted weapons by 20%, including weapons like crickets. And because it increased the accuracy of crickets, you can actually effectively increase the damage output at medium range with crickets, because more rockets are inclined to hit. So because of that, it is a favorite cabin. Well, not really pun intended for favorite, but just a cabin that's used a lot on cricket-based builds. Its connection points are mediocre, actually, even though it is one of the best cabins. You would have very little top mount space, but you do have a tree high base here, but you do lack these 5 blocks here. And the front's only a 2x4 area. That's that. Simply because this cabin is so good, you actually do not feel held back by these connection points, because basically you do have connection points on every side, which are useful enough. And generally, because of how small this cabin is, you don't really put the guns on top of it, you put it around them. Again, one of the best cabins, and definitely get it if you can get your hands on one. An actual helicopter cabin, and again an helicopter built at a load of exhibition, although I did modify it to show some actual build things with this thing. We now have the medium cabin Ghost. The Ghost is another pack cabin, which is featured on our uh, Spectral Hunter pack, but does not feature any unique armor parts. That said, this cabin is an actual helicopter cabin ripped from a helicopter. A jet turbine in the top, because that actually does have a pretty unique sound, and has a round area on the top rear, which you can actually use a double slope, etc. Style items. And the sides here are really nicely shaped to put some normal slopes in there, and it does actually just like fit there really nicely. As that you do got these wheel hubs in the front, and its perk is actually rather interesting. So the weapon damage increased by 1.5% per second while the car is in stealth. The bonus is reset after 5 seconds. And with a Chameleon Mark II, the epic one, you have a total of 10 seconds of stealth, which means that this cabin can boost your damage output by 15% for 5 seconds after exiting cloak. However, that is not as high as, for example, the Icebox, which can increase it permanently, or the Humpback, which can give it up to 25% in a certain time limit. So even though, well, the perk is pretty nice, it is not as good as it could be. And that said, we do have this giant ass, very obnoxious cabin, which is 6 high, 6 wide, and I actually have to count this thing again. This is a total of 10 long, and it has one of the most obnoxious build things I've ever seen. You do got a full back. You only got these 2 blocks in the front. The entire cabin is like non-buildable. You only got 3 blocks on the top, and this little tiny thing on the side. You do not even get stuff like right here. Even if there were like just 2 blocks connections right here, that would have made me happier than I am with this thing right now. You can just do nothing with this thing. It is only for art builds because, well, unless you want to have a spear build and you want to make use of the 50% damage boost in combination with the spears, but then you do not get the maximum speed boost from the spears. You do not get the full damage perk of the spears because this thing cannot reliably reach 100 kilometers an hour even with a cheetah engine. And that said, you do get a decent mass limit, decent maximum speed, and decent durability. It is an all-round cabin. It is pretty cheap to obtain, so that could be a reason to get it. But at that point, why not just get a Quantum, which is probably your best bet if you're a cheap player and you want to get a epic cabin, because it is a good all-rounder, even neglecting the perk. That said, we are going right over to the Quantum right now. The Quantum is basically the budget's player epic cabin. It is a decent all-rounder, 90 kilometers an hour, 12 energy, 260 durability, 10,000 mass limit. And if the vehicle doesn't receive damage for 10 seconds, energy weapons damage increase by 20%. That said, you're not gonna take 10 seconds of no damage in an actual battle. You only basically get to get your first few shots off with extra damage. If you catch people by surprise, if they catch you by surprise, then well, there goes your damage boost. It is not incremental, so it means that it is either 10 seconds nothing, and then 20% damage. If you're at 9 seconds, you still have 0 damage boost. It is again, it is not incremental, so you cannot even if you have 5 seconds wait time, it's still 0%. That said, its connection points on the bottom are decent with a 8 by 4 and then this little 1 block extension which is too wide on the connection point, but it still is 4 wide for the cabin itself. One fun fact with this cabin is that if you have a side like this, you can actually put your cheetah engine in on this side spot. Well, since I cannot actually play, since this one is right there, I can actually have to remove it. But you can actually like squeeze the engine's exhaust, which you cannot put normally anywhere else. You can actually squeeze that engine exhaust in on the Quantum. It was just a little trick I found out a while back, and you can actually put it down, put it all the way up to here, and it just helps keeping your build symmetrical, especially if you're putting like a chameleon on the other side, basically like this. You don't have to be worrying about connection points that much, and you don't have to be worrying about that sticking out exhaust. That said, the connection points on the side are mediocre because you do not have anything in the front. Again, same with the top and the sides. The front only gets a 2x2 area, but the rear does get its full 4x4 area. The top is only 5x2 and the rest is not connected, also making it mediocre. Again, this thing is basically a jack of all trades, master of none. You can fully disregard the perk, again, because you're not going to be able to use it, and generally you do not want to use the energy weapons, unless you're specifically like want to use Elias or something, but then you'll probably use a odd different cabin, because there are better cabins just in general. That said, it is very cheap to obtain, and it is pretty small, so you can stuff it inside your build rather easily. And just because of that, everybody pretty much should have a quantum unless they have the money for something better. It does have an internal cockpit, which does seem interesting, but of course, unless you're going for aesthetics, it shouldn't really matter too much for most players. Now we got another pack item, which is the Call Medium Cabin, which comes from the Horseman's Death pack and features the Death Fender, Omen bumper parts, as well as this rear finale part. It only features a very limited amount of them, uh, but it is basically a drone lord cabin, because for outside of using it for drone purposes, there's really no reason why you would actually use this thing, because it is 7 long, which is larger than the favorite or the um, Terreiro. Its connection points are like full 7x6. It is 4 high. It has mediocre connection points with nothing on the top edge. It does have this full area right here, but its top only has the first 3 blocks in the rear. That said, you do have connection points in the rear, only lacking these points right there and right there. In terms of how it turns out connects up, it does connect up really well with some AVIA parts in the rear, and well, of course, you do have your standard dev parts in the front. You can use various other front pieces as well. That's not really like problematic. But for the rear, if you want to make it look smooth, do use the AVS slopes that, well, the original pack comes equipped with. That said, its perk, when you launch a drone, wheel drone, or turret, you get an increased engine power by 50% and 10% vehicle damage resistance. And that stacks up to 3 times. So you can have 30 damage resistance for your entire build as long as you have 3 active drones. They have to be active. As soon as they die out, the perk basically resets itself. And that said, it has a really low power by default, but it does help quite a bit when activating the drone. And really to show that, I actually have to drive around. So this one accelerates decently right now, but we do actually have to add a bunch of weight to really show what I mean with this thing. As for that, we're just gonna stack a bunch of APC roof on on the top of this thing, because we want to really just get that acceleration down right now. And here we're gonna already notice how it slows down, but not yet enough, because we're not gonna actually notice it too much just yet. So we're gonna put on some container walls, and we're gonna put a bunch of these truck doors on as well. And with that, we should have enough weight to actually give it a noticeable difference. So by default, this is how fast we accelerate. You really notice how slow it is right now. But once we activate the drones, it just accelerates as if we didn't have the XR rate at all. Because of that, you can stay mobile and quick, even with a lot of armor. But again, it's only for drone boats. You have to use 3 drones in order to get this effect. But you do get 30% damage reduction on everything as long as, well, the drone is active. Here you can see how it deactivates, and as soon as they deactivate, the perk is gone. And you will notice how I'm going to be slowing down in terms of mobility after getting out of these corners. And yep, that's pretty much it for this cabin. Um, don't bother getting this thing unless you are interested in the perk. It does have an interior, again, but unless you're really just into that kind of stuff, it shouldn't really matter too much for you guys. 85 kilometers an hour is still decent. Mass limit is still decent. Durability is still decent. But you might as well just use that very cheap quantum over this thing. And now, what I think is one of the prettiest cabins, but at the same time, one of the most useless cabins in the game, the Photon Medium cabin. And this is another event craftable, and it has a very unique footprint when it comes to actual like the building hitbox. It has 8 wide on one block, then 2 blocks 6 wide, and then 1 block 4 wide. And it makes it really obnoxious to build around. But there is one thing I have to point out is that it has a hollow area in the back, which allows it to hide things like, for example, this Apollo, 2 blocks deep, where it is covered by 2 blocks of cabin. And that said, it is very similar as our previously mentioned program, in that it has the same weird hitbox. There is no connection points in this side, there's nothing in the front, and all of these diagonal areas is not buildable around. That said, this thing does improve compared to that Pilgrim. We have a lot more stuff on the side and a bigger surface at the front. I guess 2x4 is not that much improved, but it does have this huge ass top connection points, which does help this thing out quite a bit. That said, it is a very, very, very situational perk. Energy weapons do 130% damage to heated parts. Since they are heated parts do double up, it is 60% of extra damage. But the part has to be fully heated to get that full 60% of damage, and you need to find a way to heat up the part. So you might say Aurora because it's an energy weapon and it does increase the so it does get the bonus and it does heat the parts as well. But that thing's damage output is very, very low. So generally you need a support player that uses something like an incinerator to put people on fire while you play this thing with the extra damage output. So you really have to use this thing in a party. And that said, it does have decent stats: 13,000 kilograms mass limit, 800 kilometers an hour of maximum speed, 335 health. It is decent, but only if you have a party to support you and if you really are interested in those energy weapons. And that's are the really just things to watch out for. That said, it does have some wheel hubs. So if you like, I actually widened these, but you can actually put in these wheels by 1 block, because that's a small bit of wheel hub. And that's if you want them to be that way. That's not a problem. But it's really just nice to be able to hide your Apollo for at least 2 blocks in. The last medium cabin is the Steppe Spider. It is the most expensive medium cabin at a price pretty close to a legendary. It has 60 km maximum speed, 7,000 tons, 16,000 mass limit, 445 points of durability, and a mass of 3,250 itself. But the reason why it's so popular is because it increases mechanical lag speed by 40%. And this is the pack that it came with, so it is a pack item. And it allows legs to go up to a total speed of 50 kilometers an hour from their previous 35 kilometers an hour, which is 25 kilometers faster. And it helps this thing out a lot. And it is required for making competitive lag builds. And since lag builds are pretty much meta right now, if you want to make one, you're gonna need that Steppe Spider, because otherwise you're gonna be very, very slow. That said, the build that is on here is rather bad, so I will actually have to cut it open a little bit to really show you guys the build size of this thing. So its frame is 8 by 4, itself is 8 by 6, it is 4 high, and when disconnecting the thing, you can see it has a decent amount of side stuff, but again, not amazing. But it does lack in front connection points. That's one thing that's interesting. However, what the cabin is most used for is generally typhoon or tsunami weapons mounting. And with the tsunami, you can actually side mount it right here and put it above the legs and interconnect it directly to the cabin, making it impossible to shoot off. And that's one of the biggest bonuses of having the high connection points here on a Stab Spider. It is also one of the more used cabins in the game. Do get your hands on one because they can only really get more expensive. They will never really get more cheap unless the legs get a big nerf. Going into the heavy cabin class, we first got the Bastion. And the Bastion is a rather unique cabin, and it is an event item, so currently it is not craftable, although it might become craftable later. But it is one of the cabins that actually has like a real sticking out area that very few other cabins have. And in this case, it is actually the giant plow in the front. And its perk is directly related to this plow area. This entire area from up here all the way to down there has a 50% damage resistance against all damage except energy damage. Weapons like Scorpion cannot go through this protected plate, which does also make it even better. But you are limited in what you can actually place up here. You can place weapons such as machine guns and other small weapons, but you cannot place things like turret cannons because those are too large. But you can actually like use them as protection for your gun rather well. That said, it is a really long cabin, so excluding the plow area, it is a total of 11 long, and then has 3 extra length in terms of the plow, and this area right here does not connect up for frames. In terms of the side, uh, there is a decent connection points uh, in the front here, but most of the connection points are going to be located in the rear, like right here. One thing to point out is that this rear area right here can actually be like receive parts in between. If you place a part behind it, you can actually force an item into the exhaust here, and I'm not sure whether it is a bug, so it might actually not be possible later on, but for now it is actually possible to hide stuff in there. And you have a 4x4 grid in the back, and this cabin does have a double layer with, of course, the roof area right here, and then the base, which gives it a total height of 6 blocks. And of course, the width of it, the main body is 4, and the plow is 8 wide. In terms of stats, it also has 60 kilometers an hour, similar to the medium and heavy cabins of the rare level. It does have very high tonnage and mass limit with 20,000 kilograms mass limit, which is the highest in the game, together with the Humpback. It only adds 11 energy points, which all heavy cabins do, but it does have a durability of almost 500. That said, one thing that you can see with these builds is like having a backwards Goliath build, and then you basically protect your rear with the Bastion plow. But that said, I would not rely on the plow to take heavy damage. I would actually still put armor in the front, either by adding extra train plows, etc. in the front, or some other kind of protection there. Because even with 50% reduced damage, and even if you have a build that has like 3000 health, 6000 damage is not as much as you expect it to be, and you will actually die rather quickly if you just keep this thing exposed. And of course, all the other part of the cabin does take full damage. I'm not sure whether the rear, like getting shot from this side, would actually matter, but I mean, if you are fighting this thing, I wouldn't aim for this part just to be sure. I would just shoot at this top half of the cabin. And of course, I also have to point out that at the range, you can actually shoot over the cabin and actually hit the main vision area right here, and thus negating the effectiveness of this plow. While it is an interesting cabin, it is not that strong, and it is more expensive than things like Humpback. And because of that, I do not suggest getting it. And now we got the Echo Heavy cabin, featured on the Horseman of the Apocalypse War part, featuring some unique armor parts connected to it. So it is home front, this part right here, the eastern front, and then the western front on this side. A pair of a line of defense, and these front two wedge and vanguard parts. And those are all made to like line up perfectly with this cabin. So you can see here how it fits up, and here as well as this rear area right here. That said, you can actually make some parts that are almost at the same shape, but not quite. So among other things, you can use some of the twin slopes to have a similar shape right here, but it doesn't quite connect. As you guys can see, you will have that exhaust port at least there. Um, so that's one thing to keep in mind when building around this. You can get a shape kinda, but not quite with normal armor parts. Same for the rear area. You cannot really get a proper lineup. It is pretty good, but not quite perfect. And you will of course have this part like here, slightly sticking out. That said, this is a reload type weapon focused cabin. Because it can boost weapon reload speed by 50% for 7 seconds after being charged. And it charges just when enemies are within a 115-meter radius. I cannot quite confirm whether cloaked enemies can or will not be picked up by this cabin, but I assume they would not. But anyways, you can, if this thing is charging, you know that our enemies close by. So when this thing starts charging, be alert because there might be a melee unit coming to your for your ass. That said, it does have almost full power. That's less power than the Bastion. It also has 2,000 kilogram less of mass limit, which sometimes comes up when, for example, using Mammoths with this thing, because the reload speed increases by 50%. I do have to clarify, it does not reduce the reloading time, but it increases the reloading speed. So let's say if you have a gun that reloads for 10 seconds, that would be 100% reload speed. 150% reload speed would only be 6.666 seconds. So you only reduce it by a third instead of what you expect by 50%. Because if you have double the reload speed, you have half the reload time. So 200% would be the 5 seconds. You can of course further increase your reload time by either using a Colossus, which gives you a 20% reload speed, or Oppressor, which can give you up to 30% if you are driving at maximum speed. Although generally cannons are not that mobile, so I would advise using Colossus. And you can use certain rapid fire weapons, such as a Fat Man, which of course has a reloading speed increase perk, or generally just very fast rate of fire weapons, such as a Porcupine, simply because if you already have a high rate of fire, it really starts becoming like a machine gun in terms of damage output. And it can actually give you a significant boost in fire power when active. But of course, you do have to be kind of in the thick of it because you kind of need 2 or 3 enemies nearby to really charge up. So that said, this cabin is not very good for sniper units, so Tsunami or whatever are less effective on this cabin. But it is a really good cabin overall, and that is also like showing in its price. That said, it does have some issues in terms of how to build around it. So in terms of size, it is pretty large, 6 wide, and it has a total of 7 connection points in length, 4 in width, but it also has 2 more blocks in the back that does not have connection points, making a total of 9 long. And in terms of connection on the top, you only get this part of the roof. This part is only is sloped, and because that doesn't get any connection points. On the side, the connection points are also mediocre at best, not having anything in the top or here in the bottom, but you can still side mount things like tsunamis. The front has a lot of connection points, 4x4 area, which is pretty good. And in the rear, it has the 3x6 connection points, but this entire lower area cannot be connected to at all. You do have a small part where you can use sloped parts, such as a wide slope to like fit in here. That is possible, and like this as well. So keep that in mind. And I do not, if I'm correct, actually these do fit as well. So if you wanna like fill this area up, you can use things like dipper or maybe even a small strut. Actually, no, small strut does not fit. So sorry about that, guys. But dipper does fit in here. So if you wanna like, if you're triggered by this little hole, just put a dipper behind it, and it actually lines up almost perfectly with this area. So that's actually quite nice to look at as well. And that's it. Let's go on to the next cabin. Our only craftable epic heavy cabin is the Humpback. And the Humpback has nearly the same stat as the Bastion on its base, so 60 combat hours as well. It has 1000 kilogram less tonnage at 8000 compared to 9000, and has that same 20,000 mass limit as mentioned. Its durability is 470, which is pretty high, and its perk is all about being tanky, because receiving damage temporarily increases damage you deal with a maximum effect at 25% at 1000 damage. The temporarily, it basically means it drains 1% per second. So you have to take about 40 damage, sorry, per second in order to maintain its full damage output. And of course, an initial burst damage of 1000. And I do have to point out, if you have a small part such as this thing, this little Strength Foundation shop, and there's a space armor, and a shell of 1000 damage hit this part and it gets shot off, you only took 23 damage, but it will be recognized as 1000 damage for the cabin, because that's basically how it currently works. That said, the Humpback does have these pretty nice side skirts, and while they are not long enough to fit in things like a fuel tank or gas generator, as you guys can see, you actually do need to put some holes in the rear area. It is a 4x2 area, and you also get 1x2 area right there. And that basically means that if you have something like a ammo pack, you can actually put them diagonally in like this. It's not too pretty, but you can do it, and that's basically how the shape is there. It is pretty nice to put in things like radar detectors or fuel barrels, but it is quite limited to use in any other way. Of course, you can put wheels in there, but generally you want to keep this cabin a little bit middle back, and you want to have a wide frame, because this center area is only 4 wide. Since this cabin is the largest cabin in volume, it has a total of 8 connection points in length and 4 in width. It is a total of 9 long, 8 wide, and 7 high, if I'm correct. Actually, 6 high, sorry. It does have a diagonal front area, so if you, for example, have some parts here, you can actually use something like these parts to fill up this area. And of course, you can fill up these side skirts if you wish to do so. And that said, the damage increase is definitely noticeable on heavy crafts, and with its high mass limit, you can put in a lot of armor. So if you want to be a tank class, this cabin is probably your best bet, and it is pretty cheap because it is a craftable cabin. And if you are gonna get a heavy cabin on Epic, first get the Humpback, get a feel for it before starting to experiment with the other ones. The last cabin of the day is the Icebox cabin, which is basically a large truck cabin. And was part of this discontinued pack right here, featuring also the tacklers. And it is a cabin that focuses around non-turreted weapons. And its damage of weapons with limited turn angles are increased by 15% because of its perk. And I do have to say, limited means anything that does not have fully rotatable. So protectors and tacklers, etc., work on this thing. But and of course things like executioner, but also things like pyres, toes, of course the cricket as well. And I'm not sure whether melee works. I have actually not tested that. But things like incinerator do work on it. And of course, Capcan does no damage, but even if it did, then it would actually work. So Porcupine works on 2 Hurricane, gets damage buff on this thing. And if you're just using non-turreted weapons, you always have any damage increased by 15%. And it is a pretty nice bonus for sniper builds. That said, it is a very tall cabin by a total of 7 high, and for the most part it is 6 wide, but it does have these fenders where it is 8 wide. Also, the entire front area right here does not have any side connection points, and that is kind of problematic sometimes. And that said, it does have a 10 long connection area in total. This front piece right here is also connectable, so right there. And that the rear 4 blocks are only 2 wide in connection, but the front 6 are 4 wide in connection. You do get a double hood, so you can put weapons high and low, which is always nice. You do get a decent front area with the entire grille being connectable. And of course, the entire side door area is connectable except for this bottom line. The side here does not extend at all. It only becomes less wide there for some reason. I'm not sure why the developers did that, but that's just how it goes. And in the rear, you can see it has full connection points again, but except for this bottom edge, which gives a 6x6 full-on grid to connect to. And you can actually, this is actually really like a V-shaped hitbox, which does make it interesting because you can actually use fender shaped things that to get closer. So if you check here, you can only get up to there, but here you can actually get these two a little bit closer. And similarly, if you have these parts, you can actually get two close, blocks close, well, only one there. And that's basically how it is all shaped up. But I'm also pretty sure that you can, in fact, connect them up like this as well on the top half here. On the bottom half, that you do actually have to like to connect them there. You actually do have to go down here. So you can see that it really is a slanted backwards in this direction, and also in this direction. So you can actually really toy around with it. And because it basically has the same kind of shape as a train plow, really. That's basically where you have to think about it in terms of its hitbox. So if you actually are sometimes building around the train plow's front, you can actually do the same with this Icebox front. That said, because of its huge size and bulkiness, and these two very obnoxious fenders, it is really hard to build around this cabin. And that said, you can actually encase the front end as well a little bit. So if you have armor part right here, you can see the fender cannot be built around. But what you can do is use an item such as this strengthened ventilation slope, and you can actually put that in here. And it kind of clips into the cabin a little bit, but that does actually just line up with the shape, and you can actually just extend this connection area right here in that way. And it's actually rather interesting how that actually like shapes up. You can even do it like this if you wanted to, but generally you would probably want to have the shape this way because it actually fits better. But that's how you can actually just like fill up most of this area. So then you just use a normal block right there, and then you get basically this entire surface filled in. But then you do have to worry about these sticking out parts again. So that said, this thing is a great cabin for art builds, of course, since it is a giant truck, and you do not have to build your separate hood with this thing. But it does have its downside with its huge size, of course. Its max speed is 5 kilometers an hour faster than the other cabins, and it loses 1,000 kilograms of maximum mass in return. And that's that. Do get it if you like want to build with it, but it is not really a top priority for most players. Lastly, we can shortly go into the fusion possibilities of any cabin. Every single cabin has two different types of fusions, which are hauler and heavy lifting. Heavy lifting increases the tonnage by 10%, while the hauler increases the vehicle mass by 10%. Whenever you fuse, you have a 50% chance of getting either of these. And generally, the hauler is the one that's considered the best because if you do not have enough tonnage, you can add more wheels. But if you are limited in your wheels, sometimes the heavy lifting does come up. As a very high level player, you probably should get both of your favorite cabin. But other than that, do not fuse any of the rare cabins, because generally, if you want to have use a fuse rare cabin, you might as well just upgrade to an epic cabin, go up into your power score. But things I do recommend fusing are the normal buyable cabins, so the Humpback Hauler and the Quantum Hauler. I do suggest getting those two. But other than those two, I do not really suggest fusing any of the other ones normally, simply because it's so damn expensive. Especially if you want to go for a Steppe Spider, it is really expensive, because if you check the market on the epic cabins, you're gonna notice that immediately Steppe Spider's in the top of 2,500. Terreiro sits underneath it with 1,500, and Echo is also 1,500, and the favorite is also still 1,200. And right then it goes down pretty quickly to 800 and 550, and down to 350 for the normal cabins. The Ghost is the only cabin that is like really cheap, but that is because the pack it was in was actually not bought because of the Ghost, but because of its the weapon that contained it, which is the cap can. Nobody really wanted the Ghost, but because everyone wanted the cap can, there was a giant influx of Ghosts as well. So if you do want to get a cheap cabin, you can get that Ghost. But I do suggest getting either the Quantum or the Humpback. Even though the Werewolf is more expensive than the Quantum, it is not really worth that extra price, because generally it is worse than a Quantum. As long as it's larger, and of course you do have to worry about a 2 tons kilogram less of mass limit. That said, I would love to hear what your favorite cabin is in the comments below. Of course, please subscribe and like this video if you liked it. It does help getting this video out to other new players, or maybe even a little bit more experienced players, for them to know what cabins there are and how to build with them a little bit. And that's it. I hope you all enjoyed watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.